acting president at that time, Dr. Guy Scott, and a group that was being led by Dr. Edgar Chagwa, who was the candidate that was preferred by some. That culminated into a meeting that I was privileged to chair at State House, asked by the acting president at that time. There were several processes before that. But in that meeting, I had a group on my left side, I was sitting in the chair where the president normally sits. I was asked to sit there by the acting president. That's the room in which they normally hold cabinet meetings. So I was asked to sit in that chair. So on my left was Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu and 5 other members of his group. On my right was the acting president and 5 other members of his group. And I was now mediating a solution because they only had one day in order to go to the nomination that would lead to the by-election. That discussion was extremely tense. But this is where I saw what I would like to highlight as a very special trait in Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu. Clearly, while these were 2 teams, this was now boiling down to the 2 leaders of each of the teams. When we brought it down to saying, well, how shall we agree? What shall be the symbol of peace? After covering a number of areas of tension and which we're bringing now to a place of agreement, Dr. Scott, who was the acting president, got up and passed behind the chair where I was seated, and I'd been given the gavel. A few times it was tense, and I was told I could use the gavel, so a few times I used the gavel. I had to say, order, order, order. That's just to tell you what was going on in there. Anyway, as Dr. Guy Scott went over to the left side, he extended his hand to Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu. So we had a president who invested heavily in helping us to see that life isn't always about position, it isn't always about the glamour, it isn't always about associating with people that you consider elite, but it's about doing right and loving, sharing, caring, and being there when people need you. This is what he evidenced. I can now draw it down to the church. So when we interacted from the church side, this is again the same thing that I saw. And so in the context of his desire to give, invest, and leave a legacy with people, we saw how he gave of himself in the consolidation of the declaration of Zambia as a Christian nation. And as we gathered in the showgrounds, many of the pictures that were showed about him where he had his hands clasped and really bowing down and praying, and that became the picture. Every single time that there was some news item on what happened on that particular day, that became the symbol, and we used that in advertising. Fast forward a week later, we were on the grounds along Woodlands, where we were now breaking ground for what was desired to be the National House of Prayer. Of course, that project is incomplete. We believe that over time it will be completed. But the heart there was, let's build a temple where God's people can come, and he wanted that to remain a legacy. And those of us who were selected to work around, there were 12 of us who were selected to work as a team, and at our first meeting, my colleagues selected me as chair of that board, and with the former, the late Pukta Mwanza as the vice. And so we began to draw some details of how this would work. We're preparing to register that whole arrangement as a trust for the nation and for the churches across denominations to be able to have a center. I'd like to focus on the symbolism, which made him very glad as we explained it to him. The symbolism of the altar had 3 key symbols. First, the there was an open Bible sitting on the map of Zambia. So just flashing with the map of Zambia. That open Bible is open with the verse in the Bible, Psalm 133. Psalm 133 says, "Behold, how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity." I recall that as we were explaining those symbols, he was very deeply touched by the expression of unity. And he said, this is what I would like to see. People living together in unity. And so when I look back, I'm thinking that the late president saw the fruition of his desire for unity, having a background of his own party and the things they struggled through. They were barely healing. In fact, the nation as a whole was barely healing from the loss of a president. And yet they, as a group, as a political party, had to go through a process of having to select a successor, which unfortunately was a very tumultuous type of arrangement, because they fought through some processes, disagreed, so on. They were all trying to heal. So he had this passion for unity, trying to pull their party together and trying to pull the nation together, because that tension was spilling out into the nation. The second symbol are praying hands. He loved that as well. As I said, you notice many times whenever we gathered for prayer, he would have his clasped hands like this, either at State House or wherever else. So he loved the aspect of the praying hands, and he constantly would mention the fact that he desired prayer for himself, for his family, and for the nation. The praying hands referred to the consistency in intercession for the prayer of the nation, prayer for the nation. And prayer for believers is the thing that enables us to enact God's will. And let me use this opportunity as we have this tribute to be able to call upon Zambia that during this period, as we celebrate this life, let's use this time also to pray. Because in prayer, we listen to God, we hear what God has to say to us, and we gain instruction. When we are mourning at a time like now, with our emotions high, there's a way in which this thing overwhelms us. But when we kneel down to prayer, we surrender our emotions and our desires to God, and God has a way of speaking to us. And our conversations with the former president were really around how prayer would be an investment to change a life. I remember we reflected on 2015 and how at that time the economy was webbing down, and Bloomberg covered the event on the 18th of October. And their report on that event was the fact that Zambia was wasting time praying. They ought to have been in some room somewhere planning, because their economy was in shambles. I give credit to Bloomberg because a few years later, when it had been reported that year that the kwacha, to the surprise of everybody, became one of the best performing currencies that year, and that we, of course, ended up we were anticipating not so good rainfall. We ended up with a good rainfall, a good harvest the following year. They reported that turnaround, and I remember that somebody from one of their media houses came and interviewed me right here at the church. And I give them credit for the fact that even though they looked down upon the power of prayer, now they were able to say there was a visible result. So Zambia, let's remember to pray, even as we mourn and celebrate this life. Let me zero in on the last symbol as I wind up. The last symbol is in reference to flames. Those flames, again, are in fact attached to the principle of prayer, but now in terms of intercession, the flames in the Bible have been related to the power and the fire of the Holy Spirit, and how He empowers us to be able to do the work of the Lord. At a time like now, Zambia, we need the power of God, and He needs to sustain us and to help us. But the power of His word, which is like a fire, burns up chaff, things that interfere with our nationhood. And one of the things that I can honestly say interferes with our nationhood is how we handle our politics. There's no way I can pay tribute to Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu without addressing us in the way we handle our politics. We have polarized one another, sometimes on tribal and regional grounds. And this should not be so. Sometimes just around our politics and the political parties that people belong to. The democracy that we have chosen, of course, allows for people to express themselves and make their way to public life by having a political party as a vehicle to go through. And this may be useful, and we need to handle it well. However, we need to be able to see that these political parties must be subservient to our national ideals, to the larger things that bring us together. And may I appeal that as we do this morning in this commemoration and celebrating of this life, we revisit in a very frank manner how we relate around our politics. We just have to manage this space better, Zambia. Let's gather the courage. We've got to break through this and make sure that the politics become a conduit for bringing us together and indeed for bringing solutions to our nation. We've just got to do this, because if we don't, we will keep going through a cycle. May this tribute time of mourning, time of honoring this statesman, remind us that no matter what our differences are, we are one family. We must love one another. We must forgive one another. We must reconcile, and Zambia must get to its destiny. I would like to just reconvey my condolences to the Lungu family and to the rest of the nation of Zambia, and praying for the president of Zambia at the moment and the cabinet as they help us through the arrangements of this state funeral, and that it will indeed be a time of rallying together as a nation and a stepping stone to higher ground. God bless you, Zambia. The best is yet to come.